From WXXI News, this is Connections, co-hosting with my colleague Leah Stacy. I'm Evan Dawson. Well, the United States is in what some industry experts are referring to as a kind of alcohol recession. Beer and wine sales have been hit the hardest, but even some premium spirit brands are seeing significant declines in the past year.
But an annual event, which I've worked on for a decade now, seeks to breathe some light into the scene. With that in mind, this week's final episode feels like happy hour. It's all about the 12th Annual Rochester Cocktail Revival, RCR, which returns June 2nd through 8th.
And RCR, the only week-long festival of its kind in New York State, made possible by more than 30 Rochester bars and arts venues, more than 70 events across downtown Rochester. I've been a judge for the final bartender battle in years past and been to many of the events. And my co-host this hour, Leah Stacy, editor of City Magazine and producer of RCR, has a lot of experience with this. So that's the full disclosure part of it. I mean, Leah's been intimately involved with this outstanding event for a long time. And that's why I'm just going to let Leah introduce the guests, and I'll come back in an hour.
Okay. Great. So we would like to welcome this hour Chuck Cerankosky, director of Rochester Cocktail Revival.
Thanks for having me.
Among many other things, which we'll talk about. Pat Stetzel, owner and operator of Ziggy's.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, happy you could join us this year. Flo Cardella, head bartender at Leonore's.
Hi.
Hi, your hair looks great.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we're on YouTube so people can see it and they're not like, oh,
yeah, for a
man.
second I was like, but now I'm like, no, we got
Yeah,
the YouTube. Yeah, you should be
no.
watching on YouTube on WXXI
check out
News
Flo's
feed.
hair on YouTube. It is good. And joining us at 1:30 via video call is Kat D. Olson, who is the artistic director of Cat and the Coyote, an immersive dance and theater company here in town.
Yeah, that's coming up here. So
Yes.
So in many ways, Leah, this is your show here. It's been your show for a long time. So the RCR.
Oh, not Connections?
Well, Connections.
Oh, that's a
too.
bummer.
No, Connections too, in so many ways here. But what's the role of City Mag here?
So for the past, this will be our third year partnering with City, I believe, as part of RCR. So I've been with RCR for about a decade, I think. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Okay. Yeah, it's a long time. I haven't done few things
Through
that
its
long.
adult phase.
It's adult phase.
It pupated, it crystallized.
That feels like a word we should not say on the air.
It's also 12. That's not.
It's 12, yeah. Well, it depends on who you ask. But
Dog years.
Dog years.
there it is.
There you go.
It's an old boy.
So this will be our third year partnering with the city for a city social during RCR, which is always a lot of fun. The past 2 years, we've done it on the Promenade, which is that walkway that goes kind of between Dinosaur Barbecue and the skate park. If you've not been down there, it's pretty cool. It goes along the river. We are changing the location this year. And on the Friday of RCR, June 6th, we're going to have a High Falls happy hour. And we're going to do our little city social on the Ponte Ren because the city has finished it. Maybe
the Ponte Ren Bridge.
The Ponte Ren Bridge.
My favorite place in Rochester.
Really? And you're so close every day.
I know. And so it's been tough because it's been closed for all these repairs.
know.
So that's a great place for
And
a
now we
city
can go on
social.
our little walks. It's just dangerous because the brew house is at the other end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're bringing it down to this neighborhood, and we have a sponsorship for that event also from We the Hobby, which is a very fun gaming. It's really like a gaming center. They do all kinds of things down on Arlington near Good Luck, actually. And we also have Garber Automotive joining us for that, and 98PXY, which is also in the neighborhood. So Moose and Breezy are going to be doing some fun things there. It's going to be great. We're having all New York vendors. It's going to be a little street fair, happy hour.
When is that, by the way?
That is Friday, June 6th from 5 to 8. Yeah, so that's our city social this month. I know I get a lot of emails and social media asks about that, so keep an eye for those details. And that's only one of 70 events. So we have a lot more to talk about. And I am going to start with Pat, actually, because last year you did not get to come on the show with us, and you were so bummed, but you had like a pretty good reason for missing the show.
Yes. Over at Ziggy's, we're next to Bitter Honey, and Cinco de Mayo was a bit of a year Super Bowl for us, and my daughter decided to be born on Cinco de Mayo proper. So when you had reached out to ask me to join you guys, I really wanted to, but I think I was 4 or 5 days without a shower at that point. It was a long grind. And,
He's a new dad.
Yeah, I was a new dad.
It was pre-YouTube though, so you could have really gotten away with
Yeah.
just the voice aspect. Not anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, what's that beeping in the background? I'm like, oh, sorry, I gotta go change my daughter for the first time. I'll cut right back in.
How's that going, by the way?
Oh, being a dad is probably one of the greatest joys I have going, and
Did you
I
talk
say
to Chuck
that
about
earnestly.
that? Because Chuck could have disabused you of that notion. I'm kidding.
I don't know. Being dad's cool. Chuck seems to be a pretty cool
These-
dad.
these
too.
are-
Being a dad is the best.
It
These
is
are the
best.
dads of RCR. So
Yeah.
one of the reasons that we wanted Pat to come on the show is because you have stepped up to co-MC the Barroom Battle, which is our big closing climactic, which Flo has been. We'll talk about your role in RCR soon. But it's I would say our biggest event. We have it at Radio Social. It's about 600, 700 people every year. And so you guys are co-MCing. And Patrick, you also, I want you to talk about just what we're seeing in the cocktail culture here, because I know we started with this sort of like depressing, like, oh, we're in a spirit recession. But there are pop-ups and competitions and things going on that the two of you are really a huge part of in the community. And I know, Flo, you love education, so we're going to talk about that too.
Sweet.
But what do you see, like, how is craft cocktail going here in cocktail culture going here in Rochester right now?
To answer simply, I think it's continually growing, getting stronger with every new event and every new opportunity for a younger and younger demographic of bartenders coming up in our city. When I was coming up, there was the early years of RCR, and there were opportunities, but very few, and you had to travel very far to get to those. Tales of the Cocktail, Bar Convent, Brooklyn, Tiki by the Sea, all these different opportunities that present themselves for bartenders on a national scale were the things that you had to go and travel and take advantage of relationships that you built online or by ordering product. And, I did as many of those things as I possibly could. And what I was always most impressed with was the community and how you met one person at one event, and then more than likely a year later, you'd run into him at a different conference in another part of the country. And what's been really cool about Rochester, I would even say coming out of the pandemic, is that there's a lot of things that we miss about a pre-pandemic bar world, but a lot of things right now center around connectivity and trying to, promote everybody and grow together. And cocktail competitions have helped a lot with that, as well as just trying to find out where everybody wants to go for a drink when they clock out of their shifts. And last year we worked, the team over at Ziggy's works very strongly with 10 to 1 to do these daiquiri contests once a month that ultimately culminated in this big event that we had last year at the launch of RCR. And there were two people then who went down to New York City to compete against a team of bartenders from New York City in this massive party down there with quite a bit of some who's who.
And Rochester won.
And Rochester did in fact win. We brought down like 50 people.
Knocked out New York City.
We did.
Let's go.
We
On
did.
their home turf.
Yes, in Brooklyn.
They could have thrown it.
Yeah.
They didn't. Rochester won it.
Yeah. There was a lot of emotion in the air and a lot of like, who are these cats to come down here and win this competition? But that was really cool to get people, 50, 60 people from Rochester down there when they didn't have to, they weren't getting paid to. Really speaks to the community, and that's carrying very strongly into this RCR and what we've been doing so far this year.
See, I'm going to put my nerd wine hat on, because it's almost exactly 50 years since the Judgment of Paris, when the United States took their wines to Paris in a blind tasting against French wines, and the French were like, yeah, come on over, suckers, go for it. And then the French judges were like, what did I vote for? I voted for the California wines. Did I really do that? And, it was a very big deal. So Rochester knocking out New York City on their home turf kind of feels like it. I'm just going to say it sort of feels like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and Chuck, that was kind of the connectivity and the collaboration that Patrick is referencing is really what started RCR 12 years ago. And can you just talk a little bit about how from that point to now, we're in this post-pandemic still, I would say, upward slope. Can you talk about how craft cocktail culture has changed here?
Sure. I've been on the program promoting Cocktail Revival a few times, so this story may have been heard by some listeners before, but when Cocktail Revival was kind of an epiphany because the first edition happened in 2014, And so somewhere before that, I was behind one of my bars. I own a few around town, and there was this very young couple, and they were in Cure, one of my bars, and I got to talking with them, like, what are you guys doing tonight? And they're like, oh, well, we just came from this place, Daily Refresher, and then now we're here at Cure, and then we're going to go to this place called Good Luck, and then we're going to go to the Revelry, and then maybe have time to go to one more. And I was thinking, like, these kids don't know what they're doing, but they're bar hopping, but they're doing it at cocktail bars, and what they're looking for is the experience of the bars. They're not like trying to do shots. They want to try all these drinks in these nice environments and check it out. And then we got a whole group of bar owners and people together to say, is this a good idea? And we had a bunch of meetings and tried to work it out. And what we discovered is that the camaraderie in the community that Pat was talking about was pretty amazing. Like, we're all there's 32 bars part of Cocktail Revival, and actually just if Flo is representing Leonore's and Pat is representing Ziggy's and I'm representing Martine, we're all technically competitors, like technically in the marketplace. But we also know that rising tides lifts all boats, and as trite as that is, what we learned from that 2014 all throughout is that the more that we reach out to each other and share bartenders for shifts and have competitions or events and invite everybody, if one bar gets the fortune to have like a speaker from out of town come to their bar, like they blast it out there, like everybody come, like I don't know why they emailed us, but they did. So check this out, do this event, and it makes the community stronger. It makes the food and beverage community stronger. There's an artistic, there's a creative sort of payoff from that, where we make Rochester more vibrant and fun for people to go out in. And then there's also a very, not to be shrewd, but there's a very, I don't know, career minded, or there's a very like lucrative path that it is established for those working in the industry, because all of a sudden you're not just working behind a bar, you're working behind a bar that like Dale DeGroff came and gave a seminar in, or you're working behind a bar, and then like because you work behind this bar, New York City recognizes you, and you go down to 11 Madison Park 2 weeks ago, and they show you the new cocktail bar upstairs, and they invite you behind it to make a drink, and you're just a kid from Rochester, New York. And it shows you that the hospitality community and the restaurant industry here, along with it, is something that's like worth it. That's something that can support careers and support livelihoods and all the good things that should happen from a job, despite the fact that it's long nights and lots of work.
And I want to seg right over to Flo after that, because I think you're in the thick of a lot of the things he mentioned.
For sure,
The
yeah.
continuing education, you are traveling and taking notes on mixology when you're doing that. I'm a big fan of your savory cocktails. Yeah, so talk a little bit about how you look at this career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of lean on a lot of what both of you have said so far, which is community. I talk to people as much as I can, whether it's other bartenders, guests that are like, oh, this one time I had this one drink at this one spot that I can't even remember the name of, but it gave me this feeling. So for me, it's a lot about chasing not only flavor, but feeling and making somebody have a memorable experience, telling a story, making like a punny name, saying the proceeds from this drink are going to benefit this charity this month, stuff like that, which is I have great role models all around me. The whole city is filled with folks doing all kinds of charitable work, which is the whole thing of RCR. Aside from celebrating cocktails and spirits and community, it's also giving back to Gilda's, which to me, like my first year when I was working at Daily, I was like, whoa, like I didn't know that the bartending could also be like a charitable activity. I didn't know that that was an option. So that for me was something that made me reevaluate my entire career path, and now this is kind of what I want to do with the rest of my life. I think maybe bartend, maybe open a place. Who's to say?
I love that.
Yeah.
And you have been one of the people throughout the year who will text me and say, hey,
Yeah.
can we do a seminar on this thing?
Yeah.
Can you talk about why continuing education is also so important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the more that you know and the more access to knowledge that you have, the farther it's going to take you. The more open your eyes are, the more that you can open the eyes of others. that sounds like a little bit cheesy, but it's really something I believe in. And regards to setting up seminars, I just love to learn. I wanted to be a librarian in a past life. So I think that's probably got something to do with it. But the seminars that we have are so amazing. I know Sydney had a DEI over wine seminar last year. And I think that just because this event or our careers are focused around serving drinks and learning about spirits, it doesn't mean that we only have to talk about that. Like you can get down to the meat of something and kind of learn about a person and what's going on in their life and build community and connection that way. So the more you can learn, the farther you can take yourself and others.
Yeah. And I will say it's because of Flo's ideas and just energy around the seminars that we've planned, some of the ones we have, including basic ASL for bartenders, which, we live in such a large per capita deaf and hard of hearing community. I think we're the second, third largest in the nation. And so to have those basic signs under your belt and to just get that refresher every year, that's something that we actually had our first sponsorship of that event, right, this year?
Yeah, that was a we've done this program now that has been manifested in seminar and interpreting form, where we look to make sure that RCR events cater to the deaf community. And we kind of adopted that as a value a couple of years ago because we know that the deaf population in Rochester is great enough that we should be able to serve them in the restaurants. So we kind of use it as a refresher for bartender training. But this year was cool. Tito's Handmade Vodka stepped up and underwrote the whole program. So it gives us more resources to put interpreters at more events and to do a workshop on American Sign Language.
Yeah. And that's cool, too, to see during the year when we are, in a spirit recession. And I have these numbers in front of me that there's a U.S. per capita alcohol consumption is at its lowest since 1962. I'm going to be honest, I didn't know this, with a 10% drop from 2021. I think there are some clear connections we can make there, not to get too topical. But we all know what 2021 was. I think people spent a long time drinking the year before that alone in their houses. Or,
alcohol sales were up in 2020.
Right. I mean, we all remember that. Certainly not at the restaurants. That was a different case.
Yeah.
But I do think we're seeing this return to maybe an awareness. But I will say, and I want you all to weigh in because you're working actually on the floor at places. You're seeing the data and the numbers from guests. It does not seem to be affecting RCR so far this year, maybe to the degree that we thought it might. And I'm curious, do you see people coming in to the bars? Are people still drinking? Are you getting a lot of requests for? And
there may be some insulation, Leah, like for RCR or for establishments like Martine or whatever, that we may have an alcohol recession, and yet there's some insulation in some places.
Yeah,
maybe
it's pretty cold here, Evan.
That's not right.
There's first Flo kind of said it a minute ago, and Ziggy's and Leonore's and all of the other friends that are part of Cocktail Revival. Again, they don't provide. It's not a feedlot for alcoholism. It's an experience. And cocktails by nature are meant to be, you have 2 or 3 of them in a visit. It's not something that you're just trying to pound down and get inebriated when you're in a spot. Of course, there's some fun exceptions to that, but no, we're offering an experience, and I think that you see the on-premise establishment is quite busy. It's never easy. There's lots of slow nights. There's lots of difficulties getting people in. The other part about it, and I think, well, actually, you guys talk about your bars. Or do you think it's busy? Do you think you get a lot of people in?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are nights that are much slower than others, but you always take the highs with the lows, and you do all your, from a business perspective, all your spending on the average of them, right? Mm-hmm. I will make as a note that for the 12 years now I've been working professionally with food and beverage, I have never had such a push from my guest base to offer such an array of non-alcoholic options. So just like people not drinking, I mean, 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, like pandemic aside, if you had said that I needed to have a fully fledged 3-4 cocktail a menu with no alcohol in there, I would have laughed. I would have been like, no.
Not just like one veto item, but like multiple.
But multiple offerings. Like what? Like the question is posed regularly. Like, what do you have for non-alcoholics? You know, and it's past just I have a cold brew coffee or a kombucha. You know, it's like what non-alcoholic beers do you have? What non-alcoholic cocktails do you have on your menu? I mean, Athletic Brewing is like TJ Sheehan, a local distributor. It's one of their number one selling products in stores like Wegmans. That's just what people are drinking now.
And I don't know if our guests can also weigh in on some of the generational shift, because when you look at some of the decline in alcohol sales, some of it literally is for things like tariffs and inflation. Some of it is government health labeling, and there was a lot of buzz last year about that especially. And but it's Gen Z too. So Gen
Weed.
Z. What,
It's just what I was about to
oh,
say
okay,
as
yeah.
well.
So
Yeah.
legalization of cannabis. So
100%.
okay, so that's
Yeah.
having an impact. So if I were to put there like inflation, government health labeling, cannabis, and then Gen Z as a generation. And by the way, I know there's people in Gen Z across the spectrum. Some don't drink at all. Some people go out and enjoy the cocktail scene. I get it. But as a group, as a whole, Gen Z is drinking less. And what of those options there accounts most for a decline? It sounds like, Chuck, you jumped right on cannabis. You think that's the biggest impact?
It's got to be one of them. I mean, at dinner parties, things that I go to with friends, like people consume cannabis. It's legal and it's out in the open.
Instead of having a
people do-
drink?
Yes.
Yes.
But wait, but I think we're saying, I mean, Leonore's is thriving. It's busy every time I go, right?
Sometimes it's busy every time we go. We just expanded, so we have like a lot more room for folks now. But there's definitely like one slow day a week, but mostly pretty busy.
The bar scene is healthy. And I think that it changes how people, when you look at the large swath of how people are consuming alcohol, it is going to hit certain on-premise locations harder. It's going to change habits in the grocery store and getting an NA beer. But I think that the takeaway is that the bar culture is still very strong because bars stay open and hire new people and business increases and we do stuff and we're able to support this festival. On the other side of it, because the way, for those listening, the way that Cocktail Revival works is that liquor brands, we have over 60 of them this year. So still in this decline, we have over 60 liquor brands that are contributing something, anything from $500 to some over $10,000 to support the festival. They make those payments to Gilda's Club, and then the Gilda's Club then supports the parties and the events that we do. They're not writing checks. There's not a blank check culture that there was before the pandemic. In 2018 and 2019, brands, I mean, they didn't even think about it. And I'm not being presumptuous, and we don't
It was
run
like whatever
the
you need?
festival. Whatever you need. And now it's a lot more work and meetings and talking. Everyone's talking about budgets. Everyone's talking about, there's some companies that have just said we're not doing marketing this year, this quarter. There are harder conversations, but the spirit is still there. And we are really, if we're looking at it as, from a very business perspective, Cocktail Revival 2025 is on par to raise the same amount for Gilda's as it did last year somehow. So it's a lot more conversations, and there's not just 7 big fish. There's a lot of smaller brands putting in, but it's always been a competitive market. Gin categories, tequila categories get increasingly competitive. And again, whether it's marijuana, weed, or Gen Z or Ozempic, I've heard that rumor before, tariffs, or, there's all of these things. Ozempic apparently decreases your desire to drink alcohol. Someone told me that. That's on it. I don't know. They work for a spirit company. They blame it on that.
There's
I don't
not
know.
any one thing, but there's a lot of headwinds.
That's a new one.
There's a
There's
lot
a
of
lot of
headwinds.
things. But here's the other thing, and Flo and Pat can jump back in here in a second, because actually, whenever it's relevant, we can talk about my friend Dale DeGroff. But Dale DeGroff someone was talking to him, I think it was during the pandemic, like, is this the end of bars? Like, are people going to stop going? And he pointed out that human beings have been going to drinking establishments for over a millennia. So, like, for a long time. It's not going to change overnight. Athletic Brewing's not going to change it. There might be some trends. And, I mean, even to those in Gen Z that are like, it's something like a third of Gen Z doesn't drink or never has or something like that. Like,
yeah, right. It's a big
some
number.
of you will. Some of you will. Don't worry. Well, and we'll be here when you're ready
Oh
to.
yeah, we're here.
I
We're
mean-
here.
And what's the oldest Gen Z right now? Oldest Gen Z is
Whoa.
in
I don't actually know.
it's like in the third.
Jamie, what's the oldest
It's in
Gen
the
Z?
21?
No, it's older than that.
Is
Hey
it?
Siri, what's the
Oh
oldest
my
Gen
gosh,
Z?
look at you.
The oldest members of Generation Z are around 27 years old in 2024.
Gotcha.
I like that European
Look, it worked.
sensibility that you're
AI
saying.
competency.
Yeah. So Gen Z is getting toward 30 years old.
Yeah, if I could jump in here for a second too, thinking back on the things that I've learned like while traveling, as I'd mentioned earlier, one quote that really stuck with me for a while was, as much as we work in the food and beverage industry, it's far more important to focus in on people and relationships. And that's a huge part of building a community. If it's a Friday night and I'm behind the bar and I have a great interaction with some guests and they're out and about looking to go to the next spot, they're going to ask me, hey, where should I go? And what I'm going to say is ask a couple of follow-up questions, but ultimately, like, what I recommend to someone is based on the experience I had with the human behind that bar. So if I say, hey, you definitely should go check out Leonor's, what I'm specifically referring to is I hope Flo's behind the bar and you get to have the experience that I had when I was there sitting in front of Flo. And as someone who is now a part of like the hiring and managing of humans, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to hire a younger generation of people who have an interest in making genuine human connections with guests.
It's getting harder?
Yeah, I would say so.
Why?
I could find exceptions all over the place, but it's just like the basic social interaction of how to order at a bar or how to interact with someone when ordering a beverage or just having any sort of, like transactional relationship. It just seems like there's a couple of steps missing. Whereas if I was to go to someone, I don't want to say necessarily more experienced, but someone who's lived a little bit longer, it seems to be more casual. I don't know if anybody else has the same feeling.
I think it might be getting a little bit better, like slowly, but barely. But it's tough. I mean, I think you had whatever was it, half a decade, a quarter of a generation, or whatever. We went through a pandemic, and people were very inside. They were very on their phones. There's people that are coming of age now, drinking age, that spent high school on Zoom. It was a reality, and those social skills are definitely not as vibrant. I share your frustrations. I think that's happened. I see glimmers of hope, and I'm always like an optimistic guy.
Same.
But
by
yeah,
the
I
way.
think like and we can go off on this tangent if we want to, but I would blame exactly what you're talking about for the popularity of a horrible drink called the espresso martini, because people don't know what it is, and they instead of a generation ago walking into a bar and confidently going, "I'll have an old fashioned," people are going up, "I'll have an espresso martini. Actually, we'll have 7. There's 3 of you. We want 7." They don't like, why? What are you going to do with them? And it's and
Why are you making an espresso martini?
What's that?
You own the place.
We do make espresso martinis.
Why?
Well, because you
Because
give the
people
guests
want
what they
them?
would like.
Yeah.
But and you can do it. But again, it's not that the drink is wrong. It's that there's this parable that I talked to my staffs about. And when Good Luck opened in 2008, we would put the cocktail menus down on the table, and those that are older or of the age and class, the demographic that would come into Good Luck when it first opened, some of them would look at the cocktail menu, throw it aside, and say, "I'll have a Belvedere and Cran." And then I would be like confused, like, "Wait a minute, we put all this work into this thing, and you're here spending your time and your dollar, and you're out. Don't you want to have like one of Flo's like savory cocktail? Like, what are you doing?" And they're just like Belvedere and Cran, because they didn't trust it yet. And then we got to the point where like now there's such a saturation, and cool, clever cocktails are so ubiquitous and so universal and part of all the programs. And then the pandemic happens, and TikTok and screens and everything's like a micro trend and happening so fast. So now 4 24-year-old girls come into Cure, and we show them the nice trifold cocktail menu with the carbonated cocktails, and they throw it aside. They go, "We'll have 7 espresso martinis." And it's just something's missing there. So we're gonna get that.
So
back.
you feel like
We're
you're
gonna
back
get
in
that
2000. You kind of helping educate guests.
Yeah, which is really the point of Rochester
Yeah, that's the
Cocktail
point.
Revival.
Yeah.
It's community,
Okay.
it's education,
All right.
it's supporting Gilda's Club, which we have done for every year of the 12. I think we have raised more than $250,000 at this point.
net.
Net.
That's how much they have, not how much. Yeah.
Yes.
They kept that much.
That's how much I kept. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
I liked it.
That's phenomenal.
Sorry, I forgot a net.
No, I'm here
No,
to
it's
support you.
good.
I say
We
single
give-
syllable words like net.
We give
weed.
each other notes when we need to. That's how this works.
And we got to get Kat Olson into the
Yes.
conversation, and we have to get our only break. So all I'm gonna do as we pivot to the only break is remind you why we're here this hour. My colleague Leah Stacy has been working for the past decade on the Rochester Cocktail Revival. City Mag, big part of what's going on there, and the Rochester Cocktail Revival, the RCR, is coming back here June 2nd through the 8th. So it's just a few weeks away. More than 30 bars and organizations, more than 70 events coming up here. We're talking to a lot of the people behind that. Chuck Sarankoski, director of the Revival, and the man behind a number of the most popular establishments in town. Pat Stetzel, owner and operator of Ziggy's. Flo Cardella, who apparently at Leonore's is doing some savory cocktails that I have not experienced yet. And so I know.
I've done wrong by you.
I know. And
Yeah.
I also want to just say I want to clear my name in something. I was not implying earlier that fatherhood is not the best thing. It's the best thing. It's the best thing. It's just I would never have told you it's like unmitigated greatness all the time. It's stress for the rest of your life in a constant level. That's all I was saying. And Chuck understands that too.
Just like Negronis.
Constant stress. I say that as a dad and a dad to be. So, there's a lot that's on my mind. Let's take our only break of the hour, and we're going to come back, talk RCR, and we're going to bring in Kat Olson, artistic director of Cat and the Coyote, and a lot more to tell you about on the other side of this break.
Supporting your favorite programs on WXXI TV and radio is just a click away when you go public at WXXI.org. It's a convenient and secure way of supporting an important community resource. WXXI.org. Go public and pledge your support today.
This is Connections. I still remember the first Cocktail Revival conversation back in 2014. Chuck has been here since the start, and I will say this about the cocktail culture. To Chuck's point about what's changed at a place like Good Luck since the early days when you had to really persuade people to try these creative menus. Those menus are ubiquitous, and it is a credit to RCR. It is a credit to the culture change that came about almost 2 decades ago. It did not happen overnight. You go to so many places and you can get outstanding stuff. And it's not just in Rochester. I went to Hollowhorn for the first time recently. Had a great time there.
They're fantastic.
I mean, before like a
Part of
12
RCR.
a 12-mile trail race with a friend of mine who was like, probably shouldn't get a drink. And then he's like, I should probably get a flight of whiskeys. And I'm like,
I think I know the friend.
yeah, yes, you probably do. Yes, you probably do. The scene has really evolved, and RCR has been at the heart of it. And I just say that as someone who's not in it myself, but so appreciative of what you've added to the culture. So it's coming up June 2nd through the 8th. Online where, Leah Stacy?
RochesterCocktailRevival.com, and all of our social is the same, at Rochester Cocktail Revival. Very easy to find.
So we should bring in Kat, I think.
Yes. And so let me give a little bit of context for Kat's role. And also, one of the things that I've really helped build, I mean, it was in place when I came onto the team, but one of the things that Chuck had a goal for was bringing in arts and culture as an addendum to a highlight of craft cocktail culture, just because the two very much go hand in hand. And so bringing in music, bringing in theater, and so now we have this roster of events that I produce. Our team produces. We have a production assistant, Joe Morell, who's with us for the second year. Some of you remember Joe from his time as an intern at City. There's a Gen Zer who really does the most and is the absolute anomaly and fantastic. And I know he's listening right now. But our feature events are technically like our headline events, right? And so last year, we began partnering with Kat Olson of Cat and the Coyote and her husband Kyle Olson, who runs a mobile pop-up called Rumble and Stir. And Kat has experience as a former cast member of Sleep No More, which is one of the largest immersive theater productions in the world. Ran for 10 years in New York City in an old hotel. If you don't know what it is, please go Google it. and it just closed. And so I have long been obsessed with immersive theater, and she DM'd me on Instagram last year. I think in March, maybe February. She's going to correct me when she goes live here. But we became fast friends, and we are now on our third show for RCR, building it from the ground up with her company of dancers. I will say they do the lion's share of the work here. So I'm going to let her come on and talk about the concept, the crazy concept we came up with this year, and then we'll talk some more about the other future events.
So Kat Olson, artistic director of Cat and the Coyote. Hey, Kat.
Yeah.
Hi, how you doing?
I think we're good.
What's up, Kat?
Hey.
It's a good Friday
Hi, Chuck.
afternoon.
How you guys doing? Yes, it's beautiful, and I'm so happy that you guys are having me on. Thanks so much. It's my second year. It's awesome.
So, Leah Stacy, you want to kind of take us through what people can expect here?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually let Kat tell you about the show. But I will say I pitched her a crazy concept that I thought she'd be like, absolutely not. And now it's what we're doing. Because it's kind of cool.
It's so good. So we are doing an immersive cocktail presentation called Silver Screen. It is based on the Twilight Zone. And it's going to be kind of a mixture of a couple of different episodes. We're kind of playing with different dimensions and the idea of sort of like a cyborg takeover. But yeah, it's really exciting. The cocktails that Kyle is making are going to weave beautifully into the narrative, and I'm so excited for everyone to come see it. Tickets are already selling. And the idea for the show is that the audience sort of walks around the space with the actors. They can follow the narrative and follow whatever performer that they'd like, so that they get all these different types of storylines coming at them at once. So it's a very interactive performance, and we're super excited for you to see it.
And in addition to the immersive theater production, which is happening in an undisclosed location, so you get that emailed to you if you buy a ticket. And we have other feature that is Saturday, June 7th, by the way. I'm so distracted right now because Chuck is like rolling around taking photos.
I'm like, what
in
are
the
you
studio.
doing?
He's going rogue.
My telephone has a camera in it, and I used it.
We love the documentation. It's really helpful. So we have throughout this week, on Monday, we have our launch pad at Genesee Valley Club. That is with John Spaker from Fee Brothers, and that is a showcase of new to the market spirits. So you can come through, you can taste those spirits. We have bartenders making them into cocktails, and you get to vote for your favorite. So it's a little fun competition. Tuesday, no feature event, lots of bar events every day, lots of dinners, all that sort of. Our full schedule is live. Our tickets are live on RochesterCocktailRevival.com. Wednesday, we have our garden party with Eastman, the George Eastman Museum, which we've been doing for how many years?
Like 8 or 9.
8 or 9. And we love the team over there, including the new addition, Danielle Ramo, who has been so helpful to work with, but Eliza and Alan. And that is just a lovely time. I think, Flo, you've been to the garden party.
Oh, yeah.
And that's another thing we do for our bartenders and our industry folk. We take care of them. They get wristbands, and they can actually come to the events because we want them to also have a fun week, even though they are working so hard. We schedule the education for them, but then also it's like, hey, go out and be part of this community, like see the joy that people feel this week too. So Thursday we have Super Sounds, and that's happening at Anthology this year with some of Pat's coworker collaborators. Zach Makita, Matt Cartman are working on those. And we'll have a couple bands over there. Friday is the High Falls Happy Hour, which of course you'll be at because we're all going to be there. Mm-hmm. And then Saturday we have our Spirit Tasting Spectacular in the morning at the Metropolitan. That's a great chance for bartenders, consumers, anyone who really loves tastings to go through and taste 30 plus spirits. Get a sandwich from Bantam, hear some DJ music. It's just a fun little way to kick off the day. And then the theater performance will happen that night. We have 2 shows actually this year because last year sold out so fast, and we want people to be able to enjoy that and come. And then Sunday is the Barroom Battle Royale.
Years ago we decided to as Cocktail Revival grew and our team grew, our friends Mike Martinez and Justin Doucette and Leah and I, and we said, how are we going to expand this so that we can grow the audience besides just those that go to the bars, because going to the bars is an awesome part of it in the core, but there's always in the emotion behind making experience for those that may need to access these events in a different way. So from the Easton Museum to the spirit tasting at the lobby of the Metropolitan Building to especially this year's High Falls Happy Hour, which is done in cooperation with the city of Rochester on the Ponte-Rennes pedestrian bridge. They carry a low ticket price and are the kind of things you can bring your friends, family, neighbors to, because there's lots of activities and ways to enjoy the culture besides just having the drinks that come with them. You can see the full roster of events at rochestercocktailrevival.com. If you go to the schedule and click on feature, you can see all the off-bar events.
I'm just going to say it again. I love that you're doing events on the bridge. That's the word. That's a great place
Yeah.
to do it.
Hopefully it won't be
Great
windy or rainy.
No, are you kidding? We got that all out of the way in the last month. The worst spring ever. Let's grab a couple of phone calls. John in Rochester. Hey, John, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me. I just want to circle back to one of the comments made earlier before the break about some of the beauty and challenge of having bartenders or having staff in the bars that create that social experience and interaction. And a friend of mine, my best friend from college, is an owner of 2 bars in Lafayette, Indiana, and both of them I would say are excellent places to visit, and both of them were built on that idea that people who walk in belong, and the only rule is just be a decent person. And they're interesting, fun places. You can form relationships. And he was visiting last fall. He came to Rochester to visit, and I will say this guy, back in our earlier days, I would say we were just hedonists. Now we're much more controlled hedonists. But so he's now a connoisseur of rum and et cetera. But anyway, we were talking, and he was talking about the state of one of his establishments and how challenging it is to get staff in there that interact with the clientele in meaningful ways. And I'm going to paraphrase what he said here for radio, but he said, kids today just don't know how to make romantic connections randomly anymore, is basically what he said. He was just lamenting that people just don't know how to randomly socialize. He said people are just on their phones all the time. So I feel like this is a bit of a get off my lawn moment, but I just wanted to comment that certainly that's an attitude that is, or a situation that's seen elsewhere. So tough crowd.
Tough crowd.
John, first of all, thank you. First of all, thanks for the phone call. Here's why I don't think it's a get off my lawn moment. I know plenty of people who are much, much older than me who can't get off their phones when they're around family. Certainly, Gen Z, younger folks may be kind of grown up with that kind of an addiction, but we all can be prone to it. So I don't think it's just generational. But having said that, I do want to add, I think it's important to ask our guests a little bit about what he's saying about the value of having that kind of service. And Flo, Pat, when I go to places just for a great experience with either their food or their drink menu, I used to want to just kind of get seated in a restaurant. And then I started traveling with friends who are much smarter than me, and they're like, no, you always sit at the bar. You always sit at the bar.
Always.
I mean, I've heard that from Leah Stacy.
Yeah.
You sit at the bar.
I actually get grumpy if I can't sit at the bar.
And then, but, in my 20s into my 30s, I would think, well, I'll sit at the bar if I'm going in for drinks, but if I want to eat, and it's like, no, you sit at the bar. You sit at the bar. Mm-hmm. And that has been one of the best decisions I've ever made, going to Montreal and sitting at the bar at some of the really great historic places. And so for me, thankfully, it's a long list because people steer me in the right direction. What would you tell people about interacting, being willing to sit at the bar? And do you agree with John that sometimes, if you're going to go work in an establishment like that, you need to be able to engage people?
Yeah. I'm going to touch on the second part of that first, actually. A lot of the folks that work at Leonor's actually have...
And grab that mic, get a little closer there.
So sorry.
There you go. Flo.
A lot of the folks that work at Leonor's actually have day jobs, and they kind of use that as their social reprieve. So they're leaving their office, their little cubicle behind, and, making friends and making connections and talking to people. And sometimes that means spending extra time at a table, even though you're totally swamped, but it's definitely well worth it in the end. And that's kind of how you create the coveted role of a regular. I think that regulars are really what is still upholding the industry. I think that that's something we didn't really touch on earlier, but that's an untapped demographic almost of people that you're this is a real person that I made a connection with in a really human way. And they're coming back and they're telling their friends. So I think that that kind of social interaction is something that's alive and well with that specific component of people.
You're their third place, and
Yeah,
it's really,
absolutely.
really important for them, just as they are. Their consistency is important to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I consider my regulars like some of my greatest friends. Some of them we like spend holidays together now, which is really, really cool. And then kind of on that first point of that, I think that I would also always recommend sitting in the bar or sitting at the bar. I would always, venture to do that myself when going out. But I value that too. When somebody chooses to sit with me, they're saying like, no, I want to pick that person to have a conversation with rather than just sit at a table, whether by yourself or with other people. But I want to have like somebody else to like bounce my ideas off of or ask advice from or what have you.
Pat Stetzel, Leah Stacy's told me for years, sit at the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Dale DeGroff, first year he was in Rochester, said people go to bars for the bar, but they always come back for the bartender. That's just real. That's how it goes. I mean, I worked behind a bar for, I was 21 for 3 years behind a bar. And when I was back there, I had a couple of strong mentors that I got to witness bartend. And I was in college at the time and watching that. I had never considered a career in hospitality, but watching him and them interact with their guests similarly made me believe, oh, this can be something more than just something you do on the weekends. This can be something that is a career-driven industry, and there's magic in every moment. We get to make people's lives better every single day.
Sit at the bar. Leah, you were right. She's always right, isn't she, Chuck?
Always.
She's
No.
always
Even
right.
right now.
So
I didn't say anything.
June 2nd through the 8th is the Rochester Cocktail Revival. What have we missed? What have we not covered this hour, Leah?
Well, I want Chuck to tell us about a phone call he got because it was very serendipitous this year.
I work for my household, and I was doing my weekly grocery chores. I was at Wegmans, and my phone rang, and I have his number in my phone, so I knew who it was. But it was Dale DeGroff. He called me out of the blue on a Tuesday while I was at Wegmans. And I think it's just so cool because, we have this thing. Dale DeGroff, if you don't know, is considered the godfather of the craft cocktail movement. He called me because I'm the person to call if he wants to come to Rochester to do cocktail revival. It's not like
He doesn't have my number.
Right. He doesn't have Leah's number because then he would call her and be like, Leah, you're always right. Chuck's always wrong. But anyway, it's so cool because the culture, the value of the community is so great that Dale DeGroff, who's written 2 cocktail books that almost every bartender has at least picked up, if not own, and has inspired a generation of bartenders, especially on the East Coast, if not throughout the United States. He has a museum of the cocktail in New Orleans. And he's an amazing individual. But he's coming back this year. He's coming back to do a seminar to talk about Italian aperitivo and amari. We're going to host that at Good Luck on Thursday, the 5th of June. It's a ticketed seminar. So grab your tickets ahead of time. But it was just a cool phone call because it's just so casual. It's like, Chuck, how you doing? Hey, you're doing the week again. I saw it online. Like, I'd like to come up. What's a good day? And then we just have this conversation, and Dale DeGroff is coming, and Gaz Regan has come, and Dave Wondrich has come, and Robert Simonson, and Ivy Mix, and we almost got Kara Newman this year, but we got Al Sotak.
These are luminaries on the
disco guy.
scene.
Luminaries on the scene. So if you're into restaurant
Yeah.
culture, that got beat up a little bit during the pandemic, and because some people that were supposed to be good are not good people in the restaurant business. But there's a lot of heroes and a lot of inspirational figures, and this community, this city is strong enough to attract them here for the week coming up, June 2nd through 8th.
There you go. That's like mic drop. That's really good. And as we kind of get ready to wrap here, I'm thinking about John's call, Chuck, and you opened Good Luck in 2008, a year after the iPhone came out. So I don't think people were addicted to their phones yet, right?
There wasn't even Instagram. We didn't even make our first Facebook page was made by this guy Martin, who was a bar regular. And he made the Facebook page. It was called Good Luck Bistro. We are not a bistro. And it took like years to change it. So, yeah.
Oh my God.
But even there's another thing. Bars are the original social media. Think about it. That's the original way to do that.
And I mean, it's so cheesy, but during the pandemic, we watched every episode of Cheers. And watching 1980s bar culture, I'm like, no, that's your social network. That's it. And people would come in and they would like announce things. I'm like, well, you're posting. Like he's posting. Like, I mean, like that's it. And I don't know. I kind of wish we could go back there, but
we have something pretty close here.
it's pretty good.
I really believe that.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
People are talking about us.
Especially if we put our phones down and talk to your bartender and talk to the people who run the establishment. Chuck is somehow at every place he owns all at once. Wherever you are, if I'm ever in one of your establishments, you end up being there. I'm like, how?
He's got your location.
He also goes to almost every event, if not every event during our series. And there's a map. Like we have it. We have a schedule.
And Chuck is not young.
There's a lot of right turns, and when it's not a right turn, sometimes we put on the flashers.
He still has such fabulous hair. It's just terrible.
Oh boy,
It's a tragedy. There's no justice. But I want to say thanks to everyone for coming in and telling these stories. Leah, Stacy, this was a fun way to spend a Friday afternoon with you.
Yeah. 2 back-to-back hours about potentially bad data and how our communities are going to rally around.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, a little common thread there.
Yeah.
June 2nd through June 8th, the Rochester Cocktail Revival. One more time, the website, Leah, Stacy?
RochesterCocktailRevival.com.
It's not a bistro, and that website was not made by one of the regulars.
It was made by Joe Snell and Justin Doucette, and they are fabulous members of our team.
So, Kat Olson, Flo Cardella, Pat Stetzel, Chuck Sarankoski. Thank you all. Thanks
for
everybody.
having us.
Thanks for being here. Have a wonderful revival coming up. RCR's coming up here. Leah, Stacy, that was fun.
Pat, what time does Ziggy's open on Saturday?
2:30.
Thank you.
How about that? Where is Ziggy's? How about that?
Oh, Railroad Street, 127.
Public market, baby.
I'm just saying, like, for the people who don't know, I feel like they all know where Leonore's is.
Park Ave.
Park Ave. And Chuck's everywhere. But there you go.
You can catch me at
RCR's
Ziggy's
coming
in a
up.
half hour.
Sit at the bar, everybody. We're all gonna go sit at the bar. How's that?
Sit at the bar.
Sit at the bar. Have a great
What?
weekend. We're back with you next weekend. Member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.